is rich, mainly clay. In the mountain, we have calcareous soil, beautiful light soil, a lot of difference of temperatures between day and night. And Cugnoli, it's located in the middle between the Gran Sasso and the Maiella. And Cugnoli has a very specific and unique climate and soil profile, which originally was one of the main reasons why we decided to move in the area.
Can you go a little bit into detail about how Cugnoli is different from where most of us get Montepulciano from the valley and the different areas a little bit of Abruzzo?
Cugnoli has 350 meters of altitude, so the altitude is a very important element. But it's able to join two very important aspects. The altitude, so cool weather, difference of temperature between day and night, but at the same time, Cugnoli has long growing season. Because the point in being altitude sometimes is that the fall arrives very early, so cold weather arrives very early, and ripeness and the growing season of the grape can be quite short. But here we have a cool climate and at the same time long growing season. Cugnoli is located in front of a canyon where the Gran Sasso join the Maiella, so two different mountains connected through this canyon. It's a very important thing to be in front of this canyon because the winds arrive from the west coast to the east coast. So we have this characteristic constant light breeze all the year long, super important to protect the healthiness of our fruit and to have a clear air and to pull away the humidity. The soil is calcareous, rich in minerals, with different elements in the subsoil according to the areas. So we have a marley clay in some area, sand in other areas. It's very important, all these aspects. The winery, in the winery are me, as a winemaker, my brother as a viticulturalist mainly, but being a family-run winery, we manage almost all the aspects. Our father, who started the winery in 1999, is still involved in a very soft way. We have 6 guys working with us, not for us, but with us. We are a very close team in the vineyard, very close vineyard team. The dogs are part of this vineyard team, and we hope in the future my sister-in-law can join us because the estate is increasing a little bit and we need new fresh energy and people. The reason why we started the estate here and the history of our property started thanks to my father. My father in 1999 discovered here an old vineyard, an abandoned vineyard of authentic Trebbiano Abruzzese variety, which was and still is very rare to find in the Abruzzo vineyard. So the intention was to buy this old vineyard in order to save the variety. This was the most important thing for us and for me, to save the historical heritage we receive from the old historical biotypes. So we
quick question. Sorry to interrupt. How did he know that it was Trebbiano Abruzzese versus all of the other clones of Trebbiano there are?
My father recognized the variety. He was able to distinguish the variety. Personally, I would never be able to do the same because I never heard about Trebbiano Abruzzese and never seen the Trebbiano Abruzzese. But the Trebbiano Abruzzese, compared to the other Trebbiano varieties, especially the Trebbiano Toscano, which is planted everywhere in the region, has a different shape of the cluster, different shape of the leaves, with 5 lobes, very large. The berry of Trebbiano Abruzzese is big. Trebbiano Toscano has a smaller berry. Trebbiano Abruzzese, when it's ripened, never turns reddish, but just becomes sheer, very green. Is a very juicy berry. The flavors is different, has a very high acidity, fresh minerality, and rich in flavors. Even when you taste the grape, you don't need to taste you don't need just to taste the berry. This vineyard at the time was able to produce a few clusters, but very important because thanks to these clusters, my father was able to distinguish the variety. When we purchased the vineyard didn't produce grape and fruit anymore, so it took me and us 5 years of work to try to revive this vineyard. And this vineyard was able to revive with 5 years of work. Was very stressful because having 5 winters, 5 harvests with no fruit, I could feel the pressure. But I never gave up because I was very convinced in what I was doing, and for me was very important to try and to try again.
What were you doing before the winery was started, or the vineyard was started?
I studied chemistry at university. I was passionate in wines since I was very young. And since I was a teenager, I started dreaming to make wine. So approaching wine, my approach to the wine was something that happens in a very natural way, was very spontaneous, even because in my family we had the culture of drinking wines. But very soon I realized that the passion and the inspiration was not enough. Become a winemaker requires a very deep application, requires study and knowledge. I studied chemistry at university, and this was a very important element that changed my approach, my point of view. The reason why I decided to study chemistry and not viticulture, for example, is because I immediately realized how complex is the wine world. So making wines is not just about grape, but is about all the environment. I was not looking for practical skills, but I was looking for knowledge. And studying chemistry is a pure science that gave me a new point of view inside the material, not outside. And I became more capable to understand the behavior of the elements in the environment. And I became more able to understand how all the elements inside the environment are all connected. So wine is not just about the grape, it's about geology, so composition of the subsoil, is about the behavior of the roots, is about the sunlight, is about fermentation, which is a chemical reaction, is a spontaneous chemical reaction. We work with indigenous yeast, but it's important for me to understand all the aspects of the chemical reaction, the behavior of the indigenous yeast, and all the elements involved in this aspect. So my chemistry study was very important. Another important element that affected my work in becoming a winemaker have been a couple of people I met over time and taught me the importance of old vines and the importance of letting the terroir speaking as a way of life, not as a gimmick. But for me, it's important to think wine outside of the wine box, just the wine box, but all the elements connected in this great industry. So that's how I started. And when my father rediscovered this vineyard, I could felt the fire and the passion in saving this old historical grape variety that made me very engaged with my terroir. So Cugnoli terroir, and very, very proud about my native grape, my native grapes, because of my experiences, I decided to work with Abruzzo native grapes. And over the years, I understood the real meaning of native, because native are not just the grape variety legally allowed to plant in the region. But I spent 15 years. I started in 2004, so 16 years. Studying the old biotypes in my vineyard, in my property, but even I started studying even biotypes nearby, because I wanted to be sure what really was and are the real native grape of this specific area. Not just native grapes I can plant because are recognized legally. I can legally plant. So I started with this vineyard of Trebbiano Abruzzese. I propagated these old branches. I decided to work just with Massal clones. And in this old vineyard of Trebbiano Abruzzese, I studied all the vines, the roots. I discovered some other varieties like Trebbiano Toscano, because I found even a couple of vines of Trebbiano Toscano I displanted, some vines of Malvasia, but even some vines of Pecorino. which is a great discovery for me because it gave me a chance to work with the original Pecorino mother clones. So we work with Trebbiano Abruzzese, Pecorino, and Montepulciano, which are the native grapes of this area. The reason why I don't work with other native grapes admitted in this region, like Cococciola or Passerina or Montonico, is not because I don't like these varieties, is because they are not native of my precise specific terroir. Not in my estate, there are no examples, even in the area nearby, and even asking old people, even in their memory, there is no heritage of this other grapes variety. So it's very deep my sense of native and terroir. Just in this way, I'm able to work with wine, terroir speaking, and precise and deep identity.
Before you go on, I know you talk about this a lot, and it's something that I think we can give a little bit more definition to. When you say biotype, what do you mean?
Biotype is how the clone, so the DNA, the genetic aspect, able to distinguish a grape variety, because Trebbiano Abruzzese is not a Trebbiano clone, it's not a Trebbiano biotype. Trebbiano Abruzzese is a grape with precise DNA. Trebbiano Toscano is another grape with a different DNA. But inside the Trebbiano Abruzzese, inside DNA, we can have different biotypes. The biotypes are different behaviors of the DNA. So the DNA, the genetic heritage, performs differently because find different condition of soil profile, subsoil profile, or because it's grown using a precise training system. For example, in my Pecorino vineyard, is a Guyot training system. I was able to distinguish 7 different biotypes. So it's a Pecorino, same DNA, but the shape of the cluster is a little bit different. The leaves is a little bit different. The level of acidity are different. The flavors a little bit different because the soil is not all the same. In 3.8 hectares, the subsoils are different because my Pecorino vineyard of any vineyard can have a slope with different sun exposure. So the biotypes are different behaviors of the same DNA. But it's impressive how different are the flavors of the same grape coming from different biotypes. And for example, the Fonte Canale is one of these examples because the Fonte Canale is a Trebbiano Abruzzese 100%, has my classic Trebbiano Abruzzese wine, but the biotypes of the Fonte Canale is different. So different that the shape of the cluster is different, different harvest time, different growing season, and different result in wine. Not because the winemaking process is different, but because the grape has a different flavors. It's the same grape, same DNA, but different biotype. Having different biotypes in wine can even improve the complexity of a wine.
So this sounds like a good time. Can we go out to the vineyard?
Yeah.
Perfect.
I turn the camera. Okay, sorry.
So as we're walking out, just a quick, we covered a lot about Abruzzo, but these the native varietals that are grown here, what are the traditional foods that they pair with of the region?
It's interesting because Abruzzo is a region with a deep tradition of seafood because we have the Adriatic and we have a deep tradition of lamb, but not just lamb. We have a special breed, lamb breed, we grown here. So one of the most traditional food is the lamb, roasted lamb. Another great traditional food is the brodetto, which is traditionally a dish where the sea meets the land, because brodetto is a seafood, but with tomato, green pepper, so with veggies. We have a deep tradition of legumes, so lentils, chickpeas. Usually we pair brodetto with cerasuolo, and we pair lamb with cerasuolo too, but of course even Montepulciano. And we pair the legumes with very often with pecorino, especially chickpeas and lentils. So now we are in the pergola of Trebbiano Abruzzese. It's the original pergola my father purchased, and it's the pergola where I spent so much time. It's a very unique kind of pergola Abruzzese training system. The pergola is a traditional training system in Abruzzo, but this pergola is unique because it's a double pergola. So I have two vines coupled, like in this case. The reason why in this case I have just one vine is because I displanted the other vine. When I purchased this vineyard, I displanted, as I told you before, all the other varieties. And the reason why I didn't plant a new vineyard is because some of the vines in this vineyard, like this one, are ungrafted, and I didn't want, I wanted to avoid to plant a new young vineyard next to an ungrafted vine because it's really too dangerous. But it's a double pergola where the work of these roots and vines is very different compared to a single pergola where we have just one vine, because of course there is more competition in the subsoil having two vines, and at the top of course the density of the branches and the leaves, so the shade is double because we have a double quantity and numbers of leaves and branches and vines. This is a Trebbiano Abruzzese. Some of these vines are the Fonte Canale, so different biotype. The Fonte Canale is a selection of vines, are the oldest vines from 80 to 90 years old, all ungrafted. My classic Trebbiano has average age of the vines is 65 years old. Some of the vines are ungrafted, but not all the vines, and has a different biotypes, but Trebbiano Abruzzese as well.
the
Do you ever
soil.
find that they share a post, like one to the regular Piano and one to Fonte Canale in the
The
double?
difference, do you want to see the difference?
Yes, please.
Okay, okay, sorry. No, this is, for example, a vine, Fonte Canale vine. In the area where we are located, the subsoil is different. The subsoil is a sandy subsoil, and that's the reason why these vines were able to survive ungrafted because of the
One second.
sand.
If everyone can make sure they're muted right now, we're getting an echo. As long as everyone is muted, then we don't get an echo. We were getting an echo for a second. Everything's good on your end, Chris.
Okay.
Keep going.
Okay.
Perfect.
Okay. Okay. For example, these other vines are vines of my classic Trebbiano Abruzzese, Trebbiano d'Abruzzo wine. You can see the dimensions of the vines are so different because the age of these vines is different, and because here the subsoil is marley clay mainly, and the grape being Trebbiano Abruzzese 100% as well, but the grape is different, taste different, and the wine is different. In front of us, you can see the Maiella mountain on the left with a little bit of snow left. This is another important element of our climate. We are at the end of April and there is still a little snow left on the Maiella. This is an important resource of water for us in the subsoil. So in this area, even when the season is very hot and dry, the fruit is never shriveled because we have water in the subsoil. We have table water, table water. How do you say water table? Or
water table.
Water table in the subsoil, and so the roots are able to find water and to feed themselves spontaneously. We let grow the cover crop, but we don't use seeds. We don't plant cover crop. It's just the spontaneous grass we let grow. This is an important aspect because I don't want to change the natural biodiversity of the area. Walking in the soil, you can see we have a different kind of grass, and the difference depends on the elements of the soil. So all of this beautiful biodiversity helps us to attract a beautiful biodiversity of insects like ladybirds, snails, bees, and this biodiversity represents the identity of our terroir. I don't want to change at all these original elements, choosing to plant what I feel comfortable or what I consider more useful to plant, but just to respect what is the real identity of this soil and vineyard.
You're getting a little windy up there. Two quick questions for you. you were talking about ungrafted vines. Are most of the ungrafted vines in the Trebbiano vineyards? And what would you say are the percentage of ungrafted versus grafted for that and for the winery is question.
The Fonte Canale, the vines are 100% ungrafted, are 736 vines, so 100%. For the classic Trebbiano, just the 20% of the vines are ungrafted. And working with ungrafted vines was an important lesson for me because it taught me, working with ungrafted vines means to take a serious responsibility. You need to be able to respect a lot the environment where these vines and roots found their suitable adaptation and environment. It's not easy for an ungrafted vine with no protection to change, to receive a fast change. What I mean is if I feed the soil with organic element, even manure, supernatural, you bring a change. And you change the traditional environment where these vines found the suitable element to survive. So this was an important lesson for me. I learned a lot from this aspect, and that's the reason why we don't work with any manure, no fertilizer, no irrigation in the vineyard, because we work with native grapes, with Massal clones, so very well adapted, indigenous vines. They don't need any special assistance. Here we have one of my workers. Now it's not the time for cuddles. And so, yeah.
And then, so leading into that, do you define the farming as sustainable, organic, biodynamic? Are you looking at it more that your choices in farming are much more based on respecting the tradition of the area? How do you, not that you need to define yourself, but like obviously we live in a world where people want to say this is a sustainable wine, this is an organic, this is a biodynamic wine. So what would be your answer to that?
My answer is, first of all, I consider me and I want to be an independent producer. Independent means to take always the best choice for my grape vineyard and environment. We are sustainable. We farm. We respect the sustainability in terms of, we don't use irrigation, we don't use fertilizer, we don't use plastic to tie down the vines, but just a vegetable ribbon, sometimes willow, sometimes raffia, and for me, it's important to consider me just an element, the element of a connection between the environment and the wine. I think even the biodynamic doesn't mean just to use preparations. Biodynamic, I think, is the deep connection between the soil and the moon, and how a grower is able to build this connection between environment and the soil.
Well, that's a good segue into talking about the wine specifically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So let's watch you taste some wine. If you can give us a little, obviously we've talked a lot about Trebbiano, but a little bit about obviously the 18 is what's current, the 19 just came in, so you have both those vintages to talk about.
Yeah.
And then also there was a question that came up about like the difference of acidity between Trebbiano Abruzzese and Trebbiano Toscano.
Yeah.
And then just sort of, since we're in the world of Trebbiano, talking about what you've learned from, you know, how you make the wine, how has that changed over the years, and also how is Trebbiano, like Pecorino, so have such great ability to age? Sorry, that was a lot of questions.
No, that's fine. Thank you for your questions. For me, it's very important to respect the strong personality of any grape variety. And the Trebbiano Abruzzese and the Pecorino are very different. Trebbiano Abruzzese is different from Trebbiano Toscano because Trebbiano Abruzzese usually has a very high acidity, but it's a very delicate variety compared to Trebbiano Toscano. In terms of resulting wine, it's delicate, and it's delicate even in the vineyard. Because the Trebbiano Abruzzese, it's a very demanding grape in terms of terroir. You cannot plant Trebbiano Abruzzese everywhere because the Trebbiano Abruzzese want cool climate, doesn't want the direct sun, so suffers the sunburn, suffers the heat, but at the same time suffers humidity and rot and mold. So it's important for Trebbiano Abruzzese to stay in a cool area with a long growing season and a shady training system. Trebbiano Toscano accumulates sugar much easily and faster than Trebbiano Abruzzese. In fact, Trebbiano d'Abruzzo made with Trebbiano Toscano grape usually has a higher alcohol content. Trebbiano Abruzzese doesn't accumulate sugar easily. And just now, with this global warming and climate change, we can see some Trebbiano, we can have some Trebbiano d'Abruzzo wine with 13 degrees, but until a few years, vintages ago, was really impossible. Pecorino is a very different in terms of grape, but starting by Trebbiano Abruzzese, we harvest the fruit, we destem immediately. What is very important, and I never mention, is the important to work with fresh fruit. What is fresh fruit? Of course, we harvest and we bring the fruit to the winery, but it's important having the winery and the vineyard very close, because when we harvest grape in September, the temperature is still quite warm. So if you don't use protection like us, it's a pity to have the exposure of the fruit to the oxygen, to the air. So usually we harvest 2 hours a day. early morning, not in the night, because I don't want to keep and to bring in the winery and in the wine the humidity of the night. So we start at 6, 7. It depends on the season, when the sunrise happens, and after 2 hours we stop because the temperature becomes too warm usually. So the importance of a fresh fruit is the fruit just picked, but even picked when the temperature is not too hot. We destem immediately. We don't press, we don't crush the fruit, the berries. Our juice comes from just free run juice. Just a free run juice because I want to work with the purest part of the grape, and because I don't want to extract too many yeast. I prefer to have a wide population of yeast, but not too many yeast. So not the quantity, but the varieties, in order to have complexity and in order to have a more regular fermentation. In order then a faster fermentation or a vigorous fermentation. The point of this terroir is the cool climate, the light soil, and all these elements inspired me a lot. So that's the reason why I started to work with a free run, no maceration, no skin contact, because I didn't want to change or to interfere with the purest element and expression of this fruit. I want my wines are the sharp expression of the vintage, the grape, and the terroir. I don't want that any winemaking process can change and affect or interfere with this traditional aspect. And what I want is I work with stainless steel. When I told my father I wanted to work with stainless steel, he fainted, because especially at that time stainless steel was not a super luxury, fashionable material. He suggested me why you don't want oak or concrete. I think stainless steel is the most suitable element here. Because they keep the pureness of the flavors, keep the pureness of the texture, and because the stainless steel is more electromagnetic fields sensitive, so the fermentation is really engaged with the environment and the sense of the place, because the terroir doesn't stay just in the vineyard, but even in the cellar, in the winery, and all the field affected by, of course, the weather, the moon, and stainless steel are part of this terroir. So free run, all the wines are unfined and unfiltered, but clean and clear because of the free run and because of the quiet, long fermentation. I love the expression of Trebbiano Abruzzo wine made with Trebbiano Abruzzese. I love the elegant flavors of citrus fruit, a little bit of verbena, a little bit of flintiness. Here I have two different vintages, the 18 and 19. I'd like to talk a little bit of the previous three vintages. The 17 has been the hottest and driest vintage of the past 50 years. So very, very tough for me, especially because I love the freshness in the wine and the elegance more than the texture. But of course, I'm happy to respect the traditional aspect and the flavors and texture of any vintage. The 18 was a very cool vintage. I liked and I still like a lot the 18. Which has been one of my favorite, especially for the red, especially for the Montepulciano, because we had a cool climate with a significant length of the growing season. Who made the difference? So we have freshness, sharpness, precision in the wine, but complexity at the same time. The 19 has been different. The most important climatic aspect that affected the 19 vintage was the cold months of May. May 19 was so cold with a lot of rain, and so this temperature affected the production, affected the yield. We had a very low yield in the 19. The shoots, the bud breaking, budding was not very beautiful, not very regular because of this difference of the temperatures, and so 19, the harvest time was cool, but because of the low yield, the harvest was quite early harvest compared to the 18. We have freshness because of the cool climate, but more concentration and texture of the 18 because of the low yield and the less production. So the flavors in the case of the Trebbiano d'Abruzzo in the 19 are a little bit richer flavors, always fresh and elegant, but richer. So more melon, yellow melon than citrus fruit compared to the 18, always very vibrant and fresh and long minerality, but more texture and richness and more intensity. Yeah. Any question about the vintages?
I think you covered it pretty well. Let's talk a little bit about Pecorino and then the two versions of Montepulciano as well.
Yeah, Pecorino. I planted my vineyard of Pecorino in 2000 and 2001. It's a 20 years old, almost a 20 years old vineyard. It's a quite young vineyard, but it's one of the oldest vineyards you can find in Abruzzo, because Pecorino is a native grape, but is an old native grape, but the history of the grape variety is quite recent, because over the years Pecorino disappeared. Has a very thick skin, it's a very material grape, and the wine is a very material wine, but not in a heavy way. What is important for a traditional Pecorino is the altitude, the cool climate, because Pecorino was born in mountain area, and it's important to have a traditional Pecorino to grow this grape variety in the altitude and in a cool climate. A traditional Pecorino is supposed to have herbal flavors, so flavors of botanical herbs, flavors of sage, rosemary, green fig. These are the traditional flavors of Pecorino, with a lot of richness. The texture is very, very intense, but not heavy. Pecorino is an intense wine with no weight of the intensity. And it's a very interesting wine to see how the Pecorino age. When Pecorino, it's a young Pecorino, in a young Pecorino vintage, the wine is very vibrant. It's a nervous wine with different opposite aspect running into your palate. So acidity, minerality, texture, aromatic flavors. But when Pecorino ages becomes more, I don't want to see elegant wine, but more polite wine, where all the aspects follow the same direction and are on the same wave and line. So becomes a sweeter wine, not in terms of a perception of residual sugar, but in terms of flavors. So we can smell even candy lemon peel, a little bit of lemon curd, lemongrass, more complexity, sweetness, becomes even more dense, but not heavy, not oily, but denser wine.
Yeah, we were really fortunate this year to taste through a vertical of Pecorino at our national sales meeting, and it was really amazing to see, especially from the perspective of restaurants and retail, a wine that's $25 on a shelf, or $50 on a wine list that can age so beautifully. And obviously, within your winemaking style, there was really clear delineation from vintage to vintage, and that was something that was really exciting to try, especially again from that value perspective. So Cerasuolo, how would you define Cerasuolo?
Cerasuolo, it's maybe I can say it's in between rosé wine and a light red wine. Maybe Cerasuolo, I can define a Cerasuolo a chillable light wine. It's a rosé with not just a deeper color, but deeper flavors and texture. It's a Montepulciano, 100%, but Cerasuolo has a special meaning. To make Cerasuolo, I use a single vineyard Montepulciano, and this is a very important aspect, because Cerasuolo is not a Montepulciano grape early harvested, but there is a special meaning in the Cerasuolo. It's a vineyard with south exposure, so it's the vineyard where I'm able to have the ripeness of the flavors, but the texture is a little bit behind, so the acidity is a little bit behind, because in the Cerasuolo I want to have the fruitiness and the juiciness, but it's a condition. It's not a result of a winemaking process. It's a condition I want to grab in the vineyard, in a special moment of the ripeness of this fruit in this precise vineyard. When we harvest this Montepulciano grape, the flavors are so intense, so fruity, but the texture is still crunchy, the acidity is so high, and the wine is able to represent all these elements of the fruit. Cerasuolo probably is the only wine I love of my wines. I love in the hot vintages, because in the hot vintages it's much easier to reach this level of different ripeness of elements. They fit very well to become a great Cerasuolo. So there is no maceration, it's just a free run, but the color is this kind of color. So brilliant because the acidity is still fresh, not high, not super high. I have the benefit to have a low pH in my soil, and the low pH helps me in keep the vibes in the wine, and this sense of dynamicity in drinking the wines. So it's not about acidity, but it's about the pH and the minerals aspect, minerals element coming from the subsoil. So Cerasuolo is a great wine for food pairing. As I always say, is a very food-friendly wine. Great for seafood, tomato dishes, sweet and sour sauces, spicy food. Is an amazing wine for barbecue, for meat, even roasted meat, because Cerasuolo has tannins. These tannins, light but present and vibrant, are the main element able to distinguish the Cerasuolo from a rosé. But what is important, especially in these recent years, when rosé are becoming so popular, and I love rosé, pale classic rosé, but they are different, and I enjoy these wines in a different way than Cerasuolo. But Cerasuolo is another element able to increase and to bring complexity in the world of rosé. So not just one rosé, but multiple choices of rosé with more texture, flavors, with different that work differently with food pairing.
Yeah, I'm actually enjoying the 17 right now, and it's spectacular.
Yeah. And the 17 was a hot vintage, so that's what I was saying. In the hot vintages, the Cerasuolo usually is my favorite. I don't like hot vintages, but I have to recognize and admit that Cerasuolo does very well in the hot vintages. The Montepulciano, the last one, very important for me to talk about the Montepulciano, especially today, because I have the chance to talk about the 17, where we are able to appreciate, even in a hot vintage, the importance and the real meaning of Pugnoli climate and weather. So even in such a hot vintage, the Montepulciano had the chance to fully ripen in terms of flavors, tannins. Of course, is a vintage where the tannins are more present than the 16, for example, or the next vintage, the 18, is part of the fascin and element of the vintage, but are smooth and soft. The flavors are more ripened flavors, and even darker flavors because of the hot vintage. The new vintage, the 18, is a completely different because it was a cool vintage. Honestly, is my favorite Montepulciano vintage ever. because I have a combination of length of the growing season, very long, and cool climate with a lot of difference of temperatures. So it's a super elegant Montepulciano with vibrancy, with complexity of the flavors, spiciness, red fruit, small red fruit, super soft tannins, and the beautiful intensity and the silkiness in the tannins, where I love the depth of the tannins in these 18 and how ripened and silky they are.
I think it's really interesting, especially through Montepulciano, when you taste multiple vintages, to really understand how, even more so with the whites, the vintage really carries through. From vintages like the first one I worked with was 14, which was super cool vintage, and it was followed by 15. The 14 reminded me of Nebbiolo and Pinot Noir, and the 15 reminded me of what I think of as traditional Montepulciano. So
you're right.
It's a really dynamic wine, which is almost a challenge because of how the general populace thinks Montepulciano tastes only one way, and in vintages like 15 and even 17 to a certain extent, you get some of that power that people are used to from Valley Floor fruit. There's a couple questions I wanted to jump to. Since I'm currently enjoying a now 3-year-old version of Cerasuolo, how do you see a wine like this age? Staring at Dana right now and thinking about, the great rosés that age like Chateau Simone, like these and also your sort of neighbor Valentini Cerasuolo as well. What do you think is added by aging, and do you believe that this is a wine that we should be thinking about drinking the 2017 in another 5 years as well?
Cerafolo can age very well. That's the first aspect and element. But changes becomes lighter. So lose the vibrancy, the sense of the crunchiness, the sense of the fruitiness, and becomes a softer wine. Not just the color becomes softer, even the flavors. The age brings spiciness in the flavors, and the tannins become softer, creamier. I think we cannot chill anymore an aged Cerasuolo. Because aging brings the Cerasuolo in another step, in a step closer to an elegant red wine than a rosé. When the Cerasuolo is young, is closer to a deep rosé. When the Cerasuolo ages, is closer to an elegant light red wine. And I don't think we can chill the unaged Cerasuolo, maybe just a little bit, and but definitely the food pairing changes because a young Cerasuolo is matches very well more casual food, has barbecue, tuna tartare, pizza, anchovies, salty, spiciness. An aged Cerasuolo requires a more quieter, more quiet food. Maybe meat, but not roasted, more abbraccato, and then the burntness of a roasted red meat. And I think an aged Cerasuolo changes the section of the wine category. But wine is not a category, it's not a logical plan, it's just the meaning of what we have in the glass and in the bottle. So,
well, that actually, I will write down that quote since I just recorded this, but is a perfect place to sort of end today's talk. But you will be on Venice Live on Thursday, right?
yeah.
So there, obviously, it'll be a different subset of questions, but as every time that I actually get to talk to Cristiana, I learn something new. I've learned a lot just from this. So please, if you have the time, I'll send a link out as with a sort of thank you email, so you can log on to the Venice talk on Thursday. I'll also, on that thank you, connect you to Cristiana. So if you have any further questions, this literally could go for 4 hours and I'd be okay with it, but we have things to do. So please feel free to reach out. It's something I look forward to every year, and knock on wood, maybe not in 2020, but in 2021, we'll get her back in the Midwest. That being said, please follow her on Instagram if you're not. You saw her dog for about 30 seconds. The dog and dogs are amazing as a dog owner. And also, I'll be sending out an email invite later today as well. Next week, I'm gonna be talking to Alex Moreau from Domaine Bernard Moreau. A little bit later, it'll be at 11:30 Central Time, because he's really busy in the vineyard right now. So you should see that. But please, well, thank you for coming. And yeah, if you're here and you haven't tried the wines, I hope you really want to, because they're really spectacular. Cheers, and thank you guys so much.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Cristiana.
Thank you, everyone.
Everyone be safe.